I made a lot of mistakes when I first started learning to knit and crochet, and that is what we are diving into today. Hello, my name is Shannon. If you are new here, welcome. If not, welcome back. Thank you for joining me. Before you get to the end of this video today, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any future uploads. And if you like this video, give me a like so that I know that you enjoy this sort of content. But yes, mistakes I made when I first started learning. I learnt to knit when I was 10 years old. I'm mostly self-taught, and I learnt to crochet when I was 12. My nan taught me how to. And I made so many mistakes, and some of them I look at now and I think, what was I thinking? So today we're going to go through my top 3 that definitely, I would have done differently if I had to learn again. So mistake number 1, so I'm looking down, I have a notebook with some notes just so that I remember what I'm talking about. So mistake number 1, using the wrong size needles or hooks. And I seem to have done this rather spectacularly. So when I first started learning, obviously I didn't have a lot of money. I was 10 years old. I had pocket money. That was about it. And so I didn't have money to spend on nice hooks and needles and yarn. And so I just went to my equivalent of a local pound shop and had a look around and just bought the first needles and hooks that I saw, which for knitting needles, they were really small, I think 2mm long double pointed needles, which meant when I was learning I kept losing my stitches off the end because there was no stoppers, and I was getting really frustrated. I also couldn't see my stitches because these needles were tiny and often were not the right size for the yarn that I was using. I started off using more like DK weight yarn, and so everything was really tight. I couldn't get into the stitches were falling off the other end, and I didn't know what I was doing wrong. And it really just came down to the wrong type of needles, wrong size and wrong type completely. I had a similar issue with crochet hooks, again same thing, bought a pack of them, and I think the biggest one was a 2mm, which now I would be okay with. I'd get frustrated about how long it takes, but I'd be okay with it. But when I was first learning, I was like, I can't understand what's going on. I can't see anything. My stitches don't look right. I'm really struggling. And it was because I was using such a tiny hook, and often again wrong size yarn for that hook. So yes, my first mistake I made is not picking the right needles and hooks, and I guess within that realm, just not picking the right tools really. I really had no idea what I was doing, which none of us do when we first start, but make sure you pick the right types and sizes of hooks and needles, because you will save yourself so much frustration. My second mistake that I made was going straight into using fuzzy yarn, and I'm not talking about mohair specifically, although I wouldn't necessarily recommend that if you're learning either, but the eyelash yarn. So it's got like one thread, like core, and then it's got all the long hairs that come off it. And I mean, it can look lovely when it's done, but again, I was learning to knit. I had no idea what I was doing, and I was trying to knit with this fuzzy eyelash yarn. I couldn't see my stitches. I wasn't always catching the yarn correctly. Instead of catching like the core, I was going for the little hairs that come off it, which obviously is not really going to help. So I was dropping stitches and just, again, nightmare, absolute nightmare. Add that into using tiny little needles and hooks. I think you can probably imagine where that went. So yes, if you are learning, I do not recommend diving in and using eyelash yarn. If you want to, I mean, obviously I'm not going to stop you, you know, you might feel more confident than I did at that point, but it is a very different experience trying to use eyelash yarn. So yes, my recommendation, if someone was to ask me, I would say smooth, not fuzzy yarn, that you can easily see your stitches, because you, at that point, you haven't learned how to read your knitting yet. You don't, you know, you're learning what a knit stitch and a purl stitch looks like. And it's very hard to see that if you're using fuzzy yarn, especially things like eyelash yarn. So yes, mistake number 2 was using fuzzy eyelash yarn when I didn't know what I was doing. And then my final point, this is going to be quite a short video, but that's okay. My final point is not understanding gauge, and I am pretty sure I'm not the only one on this. But again, it wasn't just like a couple of years, or I learned to knit when I was 10. Sorry, there was a bug flying in my face. I learned to knit when I was 10, learned to crochet when I was 12. And for probably at least, I would say 6 years, I had no idea what gauge was. And so I would try and make stuff. I remember once I crocheted a vest that was meant to be for my little sister at the time. And then it came out looking like the size for a doll. One, it was self-drafted, and I mean, you know, that's how you learn often, is by just doing things. But I also didn't understand gauge, so I just thought, like, I measured a chain and I was like, oh, that looks about right. And it ended up, yeah, I think it fit one of her toys in the end rather than her. So, and then I remember my first time knitting a jumper, and a cardigan, was a pattern by Unraveling Knots, and I didn't gauge swatch. Now, I'm quite a loose knitter. I think that possibly is to do with how I knit. I knit continental, and that seems to be quite a, I would say, universal experience from other continental knitters that I've spoken to. So yes, I knit quite loosely, which generally means that, yeah, as a general rule, I normally have to go down 1, if not 2 needle sizes. But yes, I knit this pattern, and I knit it with the needle size recommended in the pattern. Didn't gauge swatch or anything like that. And then it turned out massive, to the point where the fit just wasn't right at all. I never wore it. I actually don't know where it is. I think it's probably in a box in storage. I moved abroad at the end of 2023. And so a lot of my stuff is currently boxed up in my sister's garage in New Zealand, and when I go back next year to graduate, I will go through that, and maybe I'll find this project I'm talking about. But yes, the gauge was so off that I didn't want to wear it. I don't even think I wove the ends in. I definitely didn't add buttons. It just felt like a complete waste of time, and it was all because I did not understand gauge. I didn't gauge swatch, and now I understand my gauge a lot better. I'm probably, I wouldn't say I'm the best role model when it comes to gauge swatching. I don't always gauge swatch. I should, but I don't. But at the same time, I have been knitting for quite a while now, and I know roughly, especially if I'm using a lot of the same yarns. So like, I use the same base by the same yarn dyer quite often. I use Mama Wooling's plush fingering a lot, and I know what my gauge is on that, so I don't really need to gauge swatch as much. I know what I'm dealing with, but I mean, probably should still gauge swatch, because every designer's gauge is different as well. So if they're also a loose knitter and then I go down a needle size to try and rectify my loose gauge, then it might end up being too small. So yeah, again, I'm not a saint when it comes to gauge swatching, but I do understand it a lot better, and since understanding it and gauge swatching more, my garments fit a lot better now. So yes, definitely look up gauge swatching, what it is, how to do it. There's different methods as well for if you're knitting in the round or knitting flat, which, I mean, I say different methods, but it's basically, I think for knitting in the round, it's almost like knitting a giant half I-cord. But there's lots of tutorials out on YouTube, I know, for example, for gauge swatching. So there's lots of resources out there. So I wouldn't get overwhelmed. It sounds like a lot, but I promise if you just watch some of them are really short, like 5-minute videos, and it just helps make so much more sense. And you will find that your garments will fit so much better. It's not quite so bad if you're knitting something like a shawl, maybe. If you're not too worried about the sizing, then that's fine. But definitely for garments and anything especially that's close fitting, if you knit something that's quite close fitting. I'm knitting a top at the moment, a summer top, and it's meant to be quite close fitting. So gauge for that was really important, and things like that, and maybe different fibres that you've not used before, different yarns. Yeah, definitely make sure you understand gauge, because otherwise you'll end up like me with projects that don't fit and you don't even want to finish them because you know you're not going to wear them, and it just feels like a massive waste of time. And just gauge swatching will save you so much heartbreak. But again, I'm no saint with that, and if you decide that you don't want to gauge swatch, no one's going to make you. But like, for example, I know if I don't gauge swatch, I am running the risk of stuff not fitting. So that is just something to bear in mind. So that brings me to the end. Those are my 3 biggest mistakes that I made when I was first learning. If you enjoyed today's video, again, be sure to give me a like. Let me know what you were making while you were watching this video. What project are you working on at the moment? I'd love to know. If you have enjoyed this content as well, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss future uploads. And if you want to catch up with me during the week and see what it looks like more on a day-to-day basis, what projects I'm working on each day, be sure to give me a follow on my social media. I will leave them on the screen and in the description below. But thank you for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed. Have you had, do you look back on your knitting journey or your crochet journey and think, oh, I made a mistake there, or I should have done that better when I was learning? Let us know in the comments, because at the end of the day, we're all learning, and sometimes it's nice to look back and see where you've come. And you might feel like, maybe compared to others, I know it's happened to me, you feel like you're a bit further behind, but then if you think about where you came from, you realise how much you've learnt and how much you've grown, and it really, I find it quite motivating personally. So let us know what mistakes you made when you first started learning, and I hope to see you on Saturday for a new podcast. Until then, enjoy whatever you're making, and I will see you then. Bye bye.